like it's the middle of summer, I'm boiling, and it's only like 20 degrees. Okay. Right, let me double check the things. I think we are live, so if we just do a quick old mic check so people can check our volume levels. Dara, say something corny.
Oh yeah, we're back. Jackals are OP. Let's go.
And then say something intelligent from the thousand something.
Hey, come on now.
Magnus did nothing wrong, of course.
That'll do. Hi chat, welcome again to another second episode of the Chaos Pantheon. Obviously, guys, I'm pretty sure something happened recently. That's probably give us something to talk about. No, nothing.
No, nothing happened.
Okay, no worries. We're just gonna chat shit then for like. Oh crap! I just swore in the first minute. Well, I'm demonetized. The end. No, obviously we've just had a Dataslate drop, so that's gonna be a lot of changes for the meta for some of our armies. Some of us here more than others, but overall we are gonna obviously talk about what impact we think it's gonna have on our armies together. And then, obviously, on the meta as a whole, because we're going to see a lot of changes, I think. No, not too many changes in terms of, like, what was already good, but I think more things are going to join them up there on what is good. But for now, do you guys want to introduce yourself? We'll go Nurgle, Korn, Zinch is going to be the order for this one. So, Dara, introduce yourself. Who the hell are you and why do I care?
Yeah. Well, it's great to be back. Hello, everyone in chat, and thanks again for having me on, Aiden. I am Dara from the Red Path. We cover all things World Leaders over in my corner of YouTube, and I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of us are rejoicing at the possibility of Berserker Hordes being back on the menu in a really big way. So, yeah, if you want to catch more World Leader bits and pieces, you can find us over on the Red Path.
And for those of you a bit more intellectual, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm David. I'm from the Tizcan podcast. You probably find me over on the Thousand Suns Discord most days. We're talking all things Zangors these days, so the bird's the word.
Ooh, the bird meta is back. So we've got Jackal meta, bird meta, and I'm sat over here wanting my Poxwalkers still be good. So thanks for coming on again, guys. Obviously, we're just missing the final god, which we know may be coming sooner than later, as we discussed last time. So we'll see how that's going. News updates for this. I have been talking to a demon person as well, so we might be able to get a demon person on here as well at some point. But we'll see how that goes as it goes. But for now, we don't want to talk about that. We want to talk about the balanced data slate that is just, happening. That happened recently. Was it last Thursday, was it? It was only last Thursday, wasn't it? Yeah.
It feels like a long time ago already, right?
Yeah, no. So I haven't managed to have a go of it just yet. I haven't managed to get a game in. But for now, I'm eager to try out stuff. It's not so much a change for myself. So very quickly as Death Guard, I'll just cover my point changes. I got 10 points of a Hellbrute. It's cute. It might make a one of more attempting. They're quite nice to have as a one of as a toolbox, but that's about it for Death Guard. I don't foresee too much changing in sort of like the Death Guard build. And just very quickly in the chat, Rins Gravity, Dara is a goofy goober who costed me one of my good noodle stars. Do not listen to him. I hope that makes sense in World Eater Land. You are a goofy goober though, apparently, Dara.
I love Rin. They bring a lot of great energy to to our Discord, and are very excited about Emperor's Children coming out at some point in the near future. I think we might lose them to the EC once they drop, which I'm all here for. I might lose myself to the EC. If that model range is good, woof.
We're gonna have to change the color of your background.
Yeah, I mean, right? We'll go straight into the purple. I'll just repaint all my Corn Berserkers and give
pink.
them guns.
You're going pink. I'm not giving you pink.
It seems like a fun color.
In the chat as well, so we got finally made it to our first live. Howdy from Texas, from Rook the Riddler. Welcome to your first live, mate. You've got the one with all the gods on this time for you to enjoy. Hopefully the second of many indeed, Ben. And I know Bashuba Christian. We had a little bit of bad timing. Our other co-host at Discussing Resilient is currently playing on Vanguard Tactics against Stephen Box with Death Guard. So if anyone wants to check that out, feel free to check that out. But or you can stay here for a bit, check it out later, or vice versa.
Why not have both open if you've got dual monitors? You
That
can
is
watch
true.
the game and then have our commentary in the background. It's perfect.
Genius. And they said Korn has no brains.
We have one brain cell. We pass it around, between each other. I've got it this evening.
Alright, okay, that makes more sense. So data slate wise for Death Guard, the real thing for us is probably that we made out without being, nerfed. I'm going to take that as a win.
Dumb question. What does your Hellbrute even do?
It's actually pretty good, to be fair. If it hits something, we can count that unit as being within contagion range, no matter where it is on the board. So it's actually pretty good because it means you can put -1 toughness, -1 save on something, and you can use a strat to give it your army ignores cover versus it. So it can actually mark stuff with dev pretty good. And it gets to super tank shock. We get an extra D3 mortal wounds on the charge, so that plus tank shock, you do 9 mortal wounds on the charge, which is kind of funny. It's still a bit overpriced at 130, but I might consider him. He's same price as Predator now, so he might slot in 1-for-1. We'll have to see how it goes. But on a more interesting note of points changes, Mr. Cornman, what happened to the Bringers of the World Eater?
Yeah, we got a lot. Well, I suppose maybe not a lot, but we got some interesting ones. So Zerx went down 10 for 5, which was a big drop, to be honest. That's 20 for 10, which is quite a lot of points, actually, when people were already bringing maybe 10 to 15, maybe some people bringing 20 Zerx in a list. So that was really nice. But I think it opens up the viability of really considering more Zerx, like, 20 plus. My current list has 30, and oh boy, does it feel real good. So that's really nice. And then we saw our Jackals drop down to 65, which I was frankly very, very surprised about. I already thought they were pretty cracked at 70. But now they're like the same price point as Chaos Spawn, which is quite interesting because it's not like a direct, obviously Spawn are worse than Jackals, so I'm just going to bring Jackals. Like, Spawn have a lot going for them as well, but now it's a real choice, which I find very interesting. We saw some other semi-interesting changes, like the Mauler Fiend dropped to 140, which is a very competitive price point for the World Eaters Mauler Fiend specifically. Yeah, they're real good. Like, a lot of people say, like, oh, don't bring a Mauler Fiend, they're too slow. They're not slow in World Eaters when they're advancing, charging, and +2 moving in various turns. The problem with the Mauler Fiend, a lot of people really like it for the tank shock because that gives him the World Eater ability then of his benefit to hit. But World Eaters are an army that really requires a lot of CP in their combat turns. So having the CP for tank shock can be difficult, but you are basically guaranteed the mortal wounds out of it because, it's a Mauler Fiend.
Yeah.
So he's kind of cool. I've seen a lot of people saying, like, am I bringing 2? Am I bringing 3? I don't know if I would go that far. But personally, if I had like 140 points floating in a list, I would look at one for sure. And then, yeah, our Hellbrute went down to 130, which is... It's probably one of the more takeable Hellbrutes. It has the weird Debt Company Dreadnought thing of like infinite fighting, which is kind of fun. It is 15 points cheaper than a Debt Company Dreadnought, and already Blood Angel players are pretty high on bringing them. So I wonder, should World Leader players maybe start considering them? I think Jamie is really looking at them at the minute as well, which is cool. And then, yeah, our Terminators went down. Like, fine, why bring World Leader Terminators when you can bring 8-bands who are better and cheaper? So I don't think they are going to see meaningful play on the table until we see like an attachable character or a good data sheet ability for them. So that was probably the most like meaningless change, but the Mauler Fiend going down, the Hellbrute going down, both kind of interesting, I would say. And then obviously our 2 battle line units going down is super, super interesting. I'm seeing a lot of like really cool list innovation in our Discord, in our like Patreon chat and stuff like that. So that's awesome. Some people got some whack ideas, myself included. Like, I'm 30 Jackals, 30 Berserkers right now, and it feels hella good. So, yeah, looking forward to it. I think we obviously are heavily affected by the wider meta changing. So, big nerfs to Custodes, really good for us. Orcs looking extremely powerful, less good for us. But something that is maybe more manageable than Custodes, we'll have to wait and see. And then, yeah, I think a lot of people are waiting with bated breath on the Tau points because that could be a real scary army for us to play into. But overall, I would say very positive balance change for us, and I think it will push us to the top of the mid-table menace kind of section of tournaments.
Nice. So over on the
essentially
side,
people have to start worrying about them.
Yeah. Definitely got to remember that World Eaters are a thing, and you got Berserkers now priced the same as Plague Marines as well, so that's going to be an interesting one. I no longer uptrade you on them. Damn.
Still better combat output though, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
So when we talked, a week ago or a couple weeks ago, I was definitely looking at a very grim picture going into this because the sentiment from everybody was Thousand Suns are going to get hit. We didn't know why, but they were going to get hit with nerfs. So everybody pretty much had low expectations. We had an overwhelming negative sentiment from our Discord server on the people who voted. It was like at least a 2-to-1 ratio of people thinking there was a nerf. And then Thursday comes and the nerf or the Dataslate drops, and it's kind of like, wait, no, we get lots of points reductions across the board. When you look into it, the stuff that reduced on Thousand Suns is mostly stuff that wasn't getting taken. So when you guys talk about your Hellbrute getting reduced and your Mauler being reduced, they reduced both those for Thousand Suns, and you know that your models have way more purpose and tools to work within your army. In ours, they are very much just useless. So our Mauler Fiend basically just gets to heroic for free. Great. Our Hellbrute gives us 1 Cabal point if you use a ritual within range. In most lists, the most you're probably going to see is like a double move and maybe a free strat or something to cast the most rituals. And at that point, you're only gaining like 3 Cabals, and maybe that pushes you over to do another free strat and another round or something like that. But at the end of the day, it's just not worth 130 points for what he does. The bright spots here, cultists. I would say right now we probably have the best cultists out of all of the chaos side. So ours have a 6-up invuln. They give us a command point if they die or kill something. They scout. And then, it's just the fact that they're now 55 points, which is like, okay, that's fantastic. I'll take that. So I would say cultists will, I could see folks who had 1 unit of them now saying, you know what, they were 65 before, or 60 before, now they're 55. So now I can, maybe find a way to squeeze 2 of them in there. The other thing were the Terminators that we had. So we talked about how expensive the Scarab Occult Terminators were, and I think they are back to their original cost now from the launch. So it's 200 for 5, 400 for 10. You're still at about a 515 point brick, if you take everything all loaded, which is still, that's a lot to invest in. And I think, I think at 5, they're not useful enough to really warrant the investment of 200 points into them. So I think it's pretty much, meta has at this point passed by where they were at the beginning of the game, and now it's kind of, they're in the realm of all the other Terminators, where it's like, look, there's better solutions to win in the game right now. The other thing that was good was possibly the Demon Prince. I've seen that getting used in more lists because he gives stealth and an aura to everything, which in indirect scenarios can be kind of cool, just to kind of stack on all the the weird armies that just seem to ignore indirect penalties. And he lets you, he basically can tell that unit of Rubric Marines or Scarab Occult Terminators to say, kill that character over there, please, and they do so. But then the real significant thing that we got were the nerfs to the enhancements. And I think they look very small because it's just like, oh, it's 10 points here, 5 points there. Most lists for Thousand Suns were already balanced up to the point where they were at like 1995 or 2000 on the dot. And once you increased that, now you have to find a way to find the points to just get that enhancement and keep that in there. And then, you might fall back to only about 65 or 75 point, or 1975, somewhere in there. So you've got 25 points or 20 points that you're working with, which isn't enough for both of those enhancements that you need, which now forces you to have to basically take a unit away. And that gets really frustrating when you have Zangor and Lighten being at 45, right? So, you need 2 of them for zooming up the table. And then you're looking at stuff like, Rubric Marines are 105, and then your cultists are 55. So you're losing some pretty key pieces of your army that you really need. So I think that change was a lot more impactful than I think people were actually expecting it to be. Where we looked at it like, oh, okay, that's not bad. And then we look at our list and realize, actually, I've got to rethink a lot of this stuff, and I've got to, juggle around a lot of things. So I actually saw my list that I was planning for. We've got Warhammer Dallas coming up in a couple weeks, and my list that I was basically toying with for that has basically have to go on through the grinder here, and I've had to make some pretty big changes too. So, that's basically where Thousand Suns are.
So I just want to ask now, Josh Roberts, what do you have against World Eaters and Death Guard Demon Princes? Why do you fear them why do you point drop the one Demon Prince that was actually seeing some competitive use?
Let's remember he nerfed the World Eaters one in the last balanced Dataslate, right? Let's just remember that.
So
before it was seeing any play whatsoever.
So he hates yours, and mine was just completely forgotten. Because like I was surprised by that. Because like the Hellbrute, we all got our 10-point drop on it, and for some of us it's whatever. For some of us it's interesting. But like when I saw your Demon Prince drop, I went back to the Death Guard and was like, oh, mine dropped as well. Because I assumed like they were doing the same thing, and it's like, given that mine is absolute trash in comparison, like don't remember, stealth in an aura is decent, but it's nothing game breaking. But like mine's like can't even give me that. Mine's just like literal trash, and it's just like no, he's just staying at like 180 points or something that he is. Ridiculous.
I think they dropped the CSM one as well. So they like dropped half the Demon Princes or something.
Can we talk about this for a second? Because this actually really bugged me when I looked at, like, when you look at Hellbrutes and Mauler Fiends and what they were doing with them. They seem to be like buffing them across the board as if they're the same unit. Yeah. But in each army, they're effectively a completely different unit. And I don't get like why our Hellbrute is 130 and the CSM Hellbrute is 130, I think, as well, still.
Yeah.
Like that, and ours have nowhere near like what Dark Pax does. You know, World Eaters have something that interacts with them. We basically don't. And it feels weird that they have the levers to balance these things how they should for each army, and they're not doing it.
Yeah, so on that note, like I think it is weird because the problem, like we see the problem the most in the Space Marine Codex. We see certain units being too good in certain sub-factions and certain detachment combinations, and then because they've not separated stuff out and pointed it, they have to nerf it for one, and they basically end up not just nerfing that unit for anyone that wasn't running those, but basically killing it for those. That way, it was, the mediocre detachments it was running, it's now just dead. Which is super weird. I understand why they're doing it, because that is all from the Space Marine Codex. We don't have that. We don't share CSM Codex, and then we have our little bits on the side. So why they have done the same approach to it, it's very confusing, because you're right. But again, they picked and choose. Why not the Demon Prince, but why with the Hellbrute? Because you're right.
Yeah, and the Forge Fiend, right, is another one. Like the World Eater's Forge Fiend is quite cheap, and the CSM one is quite expensive. I think there's like nearly a 70-point difference between the two units. And yet they have like homogenized all the Mauler Fiend points, but then not the Demon Prince points. It's kind of weird.
Just a bit. And like, I mean, I'd
it's a bit lazy, in my opinion, I think.
Yeah, it's just, it's like the Hellbrute drop is a bit of a, like, again, like the CSM one is probably the best one out of all of us. Like, I'd probably go like CSM, then like World Eaters, Death Gasper on the same, and then the T-Sum one is basically like just trash at the bottom, no offense. But
then the Vindicator too, right?
Oh
like the Vindicator went
so
down,
jealous.
I think, across the board for a lot of stuff.
I wish I could take Vindicators. Yeah, well,
but like a Vindicator in we'll say CSM, much scarier than a Vindicator in Thousand Suns or a Vindicator in Ironstorm. But now they're all the same points, but they are very, very different units across those three factions. So it's really, really confusing that they decided to kind of just like ram down the balance lever on everything rather than necessarily like, saying like, hey, maybe we want to do it here, but not over here. I'm not really sure what the process behind that one was.
So, feels like they have one guy who gets dedicated when they're doing the balance updates. They say, okay, Joey, your job is to go balance the Vindicator. Go off and solve the problem. And he goes off and he's like, well, the Vindicator can come down 25 points. Great, we'll bring it down 25 points for everybody.
It's like, that's not what I'm saying,
like
Chief.
somebody else is like off trying to balance the Land Raider. They're lost in the warp right now. But
I'm going to save my Land Raider rant because we'll save that for now. But okay. So all of us in general, I'd say like we're all. Are we out? 1,000 Sun was a weird one because, like you said, you did get points drops, but they were on units people weren't taking, and now like the solid list has become kind of like awkward because again the way the points lists making it in this edition is. Would you say that you're overall still happy as a result of it? Because like Death Guard, I barely got changed. I got 10-point drop by Hellbrute. I'm in the same point. So like overall, I'm still happy. Daru is like over the moon. He's painted 40 more Jackals in like a week or something like that. So. I'd say we're both probably winners. Probably Dara more so than Death Guard. Where would you say Thousands? Because I think yours is a bit more, like I said, interesting because you did get buffs, but it was to units that weren't really taken. But yeah, you also copped some nerfs.
I'm fine with it. I think what they're doing is generally in the right direction, and I don't expect GW to go crazy and just like start, like 25%, 30% discounts on units, even though that we might feel like that's probably where their right price needs to get to. They're going to do that in increments, and I'm fine with them kind of moving in the right direction, at least acknowledging that look, there's a whole swath of the codex that's not getting used right now, or the index, I should say, and that's the kind of stuff that needs to get sorted out before they get to writing the codex, which maybe they're doing that right now. Maybe it's already written and they just haven't announced it. I don't know. But I would say that generally speaking, they're moving in the right direction, and they're, the changes they're making. I don't think there was anybody who plays T-Suns is like, oh, this doesn't make sense and this is dumb, other than the alignment relative to the other legions. Generally all within itself in a vacuum, it's going, yeah, this makes sense. So it's pretty good.
So talking about the non-god specific factions now, because I know we don't particularly I know you play a bit, David, because you have like a couple up top there. So you could probably talk a bit more on this. I obviously just play Death Guard, but obviously I'm sure we all looked at everyone else's point changes. So on top of it of Chaos, we'll save CSM last because they're probably one of the biggest changes and possibly the most powerful changes what we've seen. But Chaos Demons, not a single change. Really confusing to me. I understand like they have a build and it kind of works. But like they've not won any events. They're really still super reliant on Bellacore, and really it's just kind of the same thing you see. Like you never see any of the chariots, you never see any of like the weird like Fiends Slanesh, anything like that. You just see like here's a couple battle line, here's a load of scoring trash, and here's 4 greater demons. And it's really weird to me to see them do internal balance passes like on the 1,000 someone, where again they did buff less used units, because that's what you'd ideally want to see for every faction is, okay, what units is nobody taking, let's give them a buff and make them more, attractive. But instead, like, looked at demons and was just like, can't be bothered with that today. And the same happened for Chaos Knights. They got no changes. Now with Chaos Knights, it's more complicated. It's probably a harder balancing aspect, but like the demons one for me especially, I just found really weird. Like we didn't see any of like, again, I'm not expecting you to turn like David said. I don't think they're going to take Exalted Seeker Chariot of Slash and suddenly make it good. But like when it's not being played literally anyway, you could like just drop 10 points off it. It literally just give them pity drops at that point. But yeah, what do you guys think? It's a bit weird that those two factions didn't get a single change.
I think you've got a really good argument on the non-battle line units to be looking at the stuff that's not getting taken and really start questioning, why does that stuff not get changed? On the battle line stuff, I think I get what they're doing. The problem we've always had is souping, and that those, obviously you get to take those, and you have to take them now if you want to get to some of the other stuff. You have to take battle line demon units to get to the other stuff, and you can bring them in our armies. You've got Nurgle demons and corn demons and all that stuff that you could bring. You have to be careful about making those cheaper than the actual troops that your army can take, because then what you end up with is basically, well, here's my 1,000 Suns with blue horrors everywhere, right? And that's I don't think what they want to see. I think what they want to see is like, hey, you can kind of splash a nice, almost like fluffy amount of demons in, and they don't want that to become something where it's more incentivized to take the demons there. And I think that's, in my opinion, I feel like that's what's holding back demons right now, because the battle line is the issue. The troops, when you look at the costs of them, is unreal. And I think, in my opinion, what they ought to get to is actually giving each of in our codexes, so like in the World Eaters, T-Suns, D-Guard, C Codex, we should have different point structures for bringing demons than what the actual demon codex has. And at that point, then you could say, well, look, if you want to bring them, it costs you maybe more than what it would cost demons to bring them. Then you can balance them that way. But I don't know if they've set themselves up to accommodate that this edition, but
I think it's not that hard, because if I recall correctly, in 8th edition there was like demon units in the CSM codex. Back in 8th, there was like Bloodletters, Demonettes, Plaguebearers, whatever. If they just set it up that way, where you have a situation where basically we'll say World Leaders, you've got in that codex, you've got your Bloodletters in there or something, right? Maybe you toss in a couple of extra ones. You don't want to be giving them Bloodthirsters, but maybe you give them we'll say flesh hounds and I don't know, maybe juggernauts, but probably not even that. And you just cost them differently to how they are in the demons index or codex or whatever. But like I am with you that like I was pretty surprised that there was no internal balance in demons when a lot of armies did get internally balanced, like mine did, T-Suns did, and a whole bunch of others did, right? And this happened not just for demons and knights, but for a couple of other factions like Drakari as well. And I feel like maybe there was like a two separate teams working on this or something, and one of them like really looked at it and was like, "Okay, let's look at the tournament list. Let's see what people are taking, and we'll try and internally balance based off that." And then the other one was kind of like, "Is this faction okay right now? If yes, then nothing changes." You know, and I feel like maybe Deckard got that, and then at the last minute, someone was like, "But remember, we are dropping the Hellbrutes by 10 points everywhere," and then that happens. But yeah. I don't know. I just thought it was like a little bit strange. I mean, like demons aren't terrible. It's just a little bit boring that their one build is Monster Mash, which, you know, I'm not like a main demons player, but like I don't want to play Monster Mash. You know, I don't think it's like that cool. It's cool for a while until it's not, and then it gets real boring. And yeah, I don't know. I think they could have done a little bit of internal balance there on the non-battle line stuff, which wouldn't massively affect, I think, allies' capability. I do agree that the battle line units are like very overcosted, but you know, maybe they bring down some of the non-battle line stuff in the various demon, you know, sub factions and stuff like that. It was a little bit strange to me, and I think Knights is another one. Like Knights has the problem of like being a good army, but it's just got a singular build, which is like what 14 war dogs or something like that. I don't know. I just feel like maybe dropping some of the big boys down is like one of the ways to stop that while leaving war dogs where they are. Like make them a choice. But I do think that that army does need a little bit more than just points tweaking. I think that is like a fundamental rewrite, or you know, a codex will go a long way into making the big boys a little bit more viable.
Yeah, I agree with that. To be fair, the big knights need something because for a long time now it's just been war dog spam, and I think the war dogs also and knights in general also suffer from you can't make certain things too cheap because again, allies. I mean, I'll ask this question to you guys just very quick before I do that. Thank you very much, Liz Chiggin, for the one gifted membership. Massively appreciate the support. If you just got gifted that, check out the community tab on our YouTube channel and you can join the Discussing Resilient Podcast Discord. And as we have like, members giveaways, etc., etc. But back on the topic there, which what I was saying about Chaos Knights, wasn't it? That was it. About allies in general. Do you think the game would just be fundamentally better if you couldn't ally?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I don't think allying has ever been a sort of like system within the game which has been like fair, balanced, well received, but still viable. It's always either like, oh god, not the Nurglings, or like, you know,
Tauda.
Insert whatever you want here, right? Like Imperium is the perfect example, right? Like they're just like, what if I plug a Calidus Assassin into every single list and it just does really annoying stuff?
Until it gets nerfed to the point where no one takes it anymore.
Right, and this is the problem with allies. They're either like the whole kind of like mechanism of allies is kind of like you look at everything you have available, you find one thing or a couple of things which are exploitable, and you just use those, and then everyone uses those because it's allies. Because why would you ally in something that's worse than you already have? Like you're only going to ever ally in a unit if it's better than the thing in your own book that does that thing, or it's something that you don't have. Like say for World Eaters, if they wanted to ally in Brigands before Forge Fiends got really cheap. It's like an option, right? But no one did it because the Brigand wasn't like that viable back then. So like from my opinion on the matter is like allies are really, really cool. Thematically, love it. Really awesome. Bring some demons in with the boys. Really wicked. But like, I just can't find a time that it hasn't been a problem or completely non-viable. And I think for the state of competitive, it's like, yeah, it's probably better off without it. But that's my take.
I kind of felt so. The initial reaction was no. I don't think the game would be better off without allies. I think they add to the game and the flavor of it, and I think that's the main thing. And I think they have a place in the game. But I think, to Dara's point, I think the way GW looks at allies and how to balance them is fundamentally backwards. they look at the allies and they try to figure out, okay, well, what's the, like, case in point, when you look at the Demons book or the Chaos Knight book, they put the rule in that book in terms of how you ally stuff. That rule belongs in the book that brings them as an ally to determine how you are allowed to bring them and what is the cost of bringing them and what are your restrictions for that. Because then it needs to be tailored to that army, because you can, case in point, you can look at things like the assassins, the Imperial agents. It might or should maybe cost Raven Guard, I don't know, less, more, depending on how you're looking at it, for them to bring assassins in, because that's kind of like their thing a little bit, stealth and special operations. So you should be able to tailor how you bring the allies to that book and not trying to figure out, okay, here's the allies and here's how it's brought. And until they change that, I think the problem will just continue to exist.
I agree. I think if they actually put the effort into balance allies as allies rather than just this is a unit from this book and you take it, then it would be all right. But just given Gino's track record, they and the worst feeling as well is like when we had like Drakari at the start of this edition, and like units were being taken by Eldar, which were already broken as hell, and then they nerfed the Drakari units. So
I mean, there was Yannari of 8th edition, right? Like that was a nightmare.
Yeah. I mean, MSU Eldar still often has 3 Scourge units, which is like, where's their battle line tax, and that's like one of the allies thing that really annoys me at the minute. It's like one rule for ye, one rule for me, where it's kind of like Imperium and Xenos allies are like, yeah, take whatever you want, it's fine. And then for us, like, you will have battle line and you will deal with that. And I'm like, man, like, what was going on in World Eaters that was causing them such a problem? Like Fleshhounds.
That one I blame us. I think we were the ones that broke that.
I think you guys might have been the problem there. Yeah, but then
we had the blue scribes and the changelings.
I'm just so agree with Nurglings. Like,
why are Nurglings battle line?
When that came out, why didn't you just say if taken as allies, or just battle line if Chaos Demons? Do you know what I mean? Like, you could just change it so that I can't do it for free. Because I mean, like, it changed nothing. I get it. They wanted to get rid of people spamming loan up characters in Thousand Suns, but yeah, weird choices. Like I said, I don't want to take away Themax because I think Themax are really cool in the game, but I think if they're going to continue like with allies in the state they are, they need to put effort into balancing them. And it's not just an allies thing; it is units. Looking at like again, the Space Marine book's a goddamn mess. Like, because you got units that are copying nerfs, and Jimmy, who was playing his Imperial Fist Anvil Siege First, just took 100-point nerf because he was happening to use a unit that the good list was using in Ironstorm, and he's like, cool, that's fair for Jimmy.
I'm sorry for Jimmy, but they got to take those gladiators out back. They had to do something. But yeah, it is like it's a real problem where it's kind of like, unless you're going to point things out, especially in the Space Marine case of like point them out based on specific detachments, there's never really going to be solid internal balance in that book. It does, in a weird way, sort of like help the theme in inverted commas of like what they want the Space Marine Codex to be, because it's like, well, if you want this unit to be good, it's really only going to be worth its points if you take it in Iron Storm. So then Iron Storm becomes the tank one, and then it cascades down from there. Except for when Iron Storm is the, like, I think Brian has it like correct. He calls it like the Fortnite battle bus when you've just got the Storm Raven flying around. That thing needs to be absolutely put in the bin. I am so done with Storm Ravens being good. It's like, we've had this since 7th,
Especially when they've put all the other aircraft in the game in timeout. And I'm okay with that, but just be equal about it and across the board. Like Helldrakes are our counter to something like a Storm Raven, basically. And way too expensive, and they haven't touched the Helldrake. And in an update when we saw all sorts of stuff get point reductions for Thousand Suns, and the Helldrake wasn't one of them, that tells you all you need to know about how they feel about aircraft right now.
Yeah, it's even worse if you're like a Dark Angel player at the moment and someone's looking at your win rate like, look, you're fine, and it's like, no, it's the Storm Raven build. I want to play with my Deathwing Knights.
Hey man, the Lion got the biggest points drop of the entire thing. He dropped 50 points, and he's still not as good as the Iron Storm build.
Still not taking him.
But yeah, let's a funny one.
We'll move on to CSM, because CSM probably the one that got the biggest drops. Definitely got the most drops out of all of us. Now, obviously, CSM did take a big hit. Their win rate had dropped. Their play rate had plummeted because, unlike people who are dedicated to God Legions, Undivided are cowards. and give up the second stuff gets hard, unlike us. That's why we're superior. But they definitely got quite a lot of points drops, and on units, some of the units that were already pretty good, like Legionnaires, were super underrated, and now they got a points drop. They are like 675 points or something. They're super cheap. So we're going to see probably a lot of them. Bikers went down. Bikers were already good. Vindicator went down.
Bikers are ridiculous.
Vindicator's incredible, especially like with the the packs, because packs can just take any mediocre unit and just turn it into absolute insanity. Especially with like Mark and Nurgle for sustained fives is probably the most powerful thing they got. And yeah, it's pretty dumb. So I think at the moment there's a lot of eyes that are all over like Orcs and Tau and stuff. But as we were talking between ourselves before the podcast, obviously the Codex is coming, but there could be a really nasty build come out for this like month, 2 months before the Codex comes out, which everyone is sort of like looking over at the moment for CSM.
Yeah, I think it's if this had happened at any other time than when it did, I would be pretty worried. But I think because of the fact that like it's happening just before the Codex, a lot of people won't really take it seriously. And mainly we'll say like top players, like WTC players, definitely won't take it seriously. Though I don't think we're going to see CSM like jump out and start doing extremely well in the next month before the book drops. But I definitely think that like if there is a faction loyalist in there who knows their stuff and they rock up to a tournament table and you're not ready for MSU, Legionnaire, and Chosen spam, you are going to get found out real quick. And that's kind of what I'm scared of for CSM. I'm not scared of them like dominating. I'm scared of like the faction veterans who are like, okay, I might only have a month, but like if this happened for World Eaters and our Codex was like in a month, I would be like, maybe I can hit 2 GTs in 1 month, and pump that win rate up. For those people, yeah, it's great, but I guess the likelihood of actually facing them on the table is like slim chances. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think they got a scary amount of points decreases on units which, as you rightfully said, are already good. Like that index is kind of cracked because like it's a lot of good data sheets and then a layered army rule and detachment rule which like augment those already good data sheets.
It's like, imagine if we could in our armies just pick before the game starts lethal 5s or sustained 5s on any unit we want. It's mental. Like if I could just go and slap like I'm gonna go put sustained 5s on my Predators, cool, I'm gonna go slap that on.
As someone who can kind of do it on a turn by turn basis, it does feel good. But yeah, it's like it's cracked. I'm super scared for their Codex. I think that could like literally break the game apart. But hey, we'll see. Maybe it's not going to be that bad. Maybe it's going to be a Custodes job. But what if it's an Orcs job? Is my question to everyone who is like, it's going to be bad. They're a melee faction. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Possessed look really, really good now as well. Possessed drop points, and they are already very scary. I think like if we're going to see CSM, like if you're going to play them before their Codex comes out, you're going to be playing like probably MSU spam, just like tons of bodies all over the board, or you're going to be playing a terrifying gun line with like triple Vindicator or something like that. That just absolute like Vindicators on that stat block with dark packs. Oh my god, that is crazy good. So yeah, I think it's going to be one of two things. Most likely the MSU build, though. I think.
Okay. Any thoughts,
I
David?
felt a little awkward as you were bringing that up because we can actually tailor at the beginning of a return and just say our psychic stuff gets lethal or devastating wounds or sustained hits. So we kind of do have that, so I can't really complain. But at the same rate, we put weird stuff on a bunch of stuff like Hellbrutes. I keep coming back to Hellbrutes and the abilities that they've put on them. They're so unequal and nonsensical. Like the stuff that should be weak should be like in CSM, whereas like theirs is probably hands down the best Hellbrute. What it does, and like the rest of the armies just kind of get these piddly abilities on them, and I think CSM is actually going to be a big problem, and it's going to make a lot of noise in the next month. And the reason I say that is because you have GW Dallas coming up, and that's going to be a very big tournament. It's going to get lots of coverage. A lot of people are going to see it, and I think some of the CSM lists that go to that have a lot of them in Texas. Some of them are going to do very, very well. and I think right after that, you also have there's an event in San Antonio that will also get quite a bit of coverage, and there's going to be enough of it that I see the opportunity there for if they follow through on the changes they got and they do well. The players do well at those tournaments, then they will make a lot of noise. And I think we're going to have one of those situations where going into the Codex, everybody's feeling like these guys are way overpowered. And I worry that, as we were talking before the podcast or the show here, generally speaking, when the armies have come out and gotten their codexes, they're a little underplayed. They're a little almost like a little bit of a reduction in power across the board. And then, if you're doing 8 detachments, does that raise the risk of there's going to be one that's nutty and really, really good? And that might be the case. And, then people are going to be complaining about CSM for quite a while. So,
I will
feel
say
like that's what's going to happen.
I will say GW are have a track record at this point of anytime CSM are good, they are very quick to jump on them. It's become a pattern, right? I've seen it since early 8th edition. Anytime CSM rear their head in the meta, they get curb stomped, right? Even in 10th, they were top dog for maybe 2 months. And, Eldar was the very gentle, pat on the shoulder, incremental changes. CSM was just no, into the gutter with you.
CSM was just next now.
Yeah, right. And that happens every time. The only time it didn't happen was when we had the Black Rune of Damnation. And that shit was cracked.
Oh, God, that thing.
That was so good. Oh, take me back, right? But yeah, I don't know. I genuinely think it's... Okay, I guess I'm coming at it from a super biased lens as well, where I'm world leaders have great play into MSU CSM. I'm oh, okay, what are you going to do? Shoot my 10 berserkers? Oh no, they blood surge into you, and you're dead. So it's probably fine for me. And I think T-Sons have a really good game into them as well, because it's just loads of tiny squads. All right, Doombolt, 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 and then they're all gone. Deck Guard, I guess, Aiden, your weird, Plague Marine, Stinky Flamer list probably has a great time into them too, because it's just oh, look, tons of infantry.
Show with 3 Vindicators in trouble.
Yeah, right? I mean, we're all in trouble if 3 Vindicators show up, but yeah, that's a story for a different time. I see what you're saying, Dave. I do think there's some big events that people can hit. I just think the really good players don't care about CSM right now, because it's a meaningless faction to them. They're why would I use it when I've only got it for a month? Especially any of them that are prepping for WTC, because it's definitely not going to exist for them. I'm curious to see though. I kind of want to be wrong. I want CSM MSU to be good, because it's just really cool in my mind. Just dudes rolling around and all that kind of stuff. I'm happy for them. I'm hyped for their codex, just because being a World Leaders player, I have a 6,000 point CSM army after our first codex drop. So,
yeah, true.
Yeah, who knows? We'll see where it goes. But they're one of the ones I'm a little bit more excited for. But I agree, they do look very, very powerful right now. It's just a question of how popular are they going to be while they are like this.
Yeah. It's not just a matter of the army being really good. You have to actually have folks, like you said, that are good enough to push the army for a win at a big GT. And actually get the matchups they need and have some stuff actually go right for them at that event. I mean, you probably know better than anybody. I mean, you can have events that you have a really strong list and you get the worst matchups, and it doesn't mean that the stuff you have in your list is, that bad. It just that's the matchup you got, and that's the path you got, and it didn't work out.
Especially in 10th edition, there's a lot of rock paper scissors. Again, you can run the best if you run all they said the Chosen MSU, the Legionnaire MSU, you run into double Storm Raven, Iron Storm, cool. You can't even charge them. GG. So yeah, you are right on that one. But let's look at the external meta now, because we sort of touched on all the Chaos factions. We'll talk about what were the top dogs and where they are now. So we'll start off at the very top with Mr. Robotman, Necrons. Necrons did get some points. This is right. Okay, little rant time. Necrons got point increases, rightfully so. They also got point decreases, which I kind of get, but it's kind of confusing to me that, again, the discussion we had before, that you will take a faction that was at the top of the game, you will nerf them, but then worry and be okay, give them some consolation buffs on the not so used units, but then you'll look at certain factions like demons who weren't winning everything and not give them anything. it's confusing to me. But what they did do is we did see a big nerf to Catan points. I still personally think they're probably still too cheap. They're still sub 300, which is still a bit ridiculous if you ask me. But at least the Nightbringer is now the most expensive one where he should be. So thank Christ for that. We saw Chronomancers and Technomancers, and that Technomancer one, I want to hear your guys' opinion on, because this is weird. Technomancer went up in 25 points per guy. It's quite a lot. Wraiths, completely untouched. Why?
This to me was like the because I watched the MetaWatch video, and Josh Roberts kind of touched on it, being like, "Oh, we didn't think rates were that good, but it was the Technomancer that was making them that good." I'm like, my brother in Christ, you play the army. You have won many majors with this army. That is not true. You know, like rates were a problem with or without the Technomancer. He made them very, very good, but they were already super damn good as well. And it's really weird because, like, if you were, I can't remember, the guy who was playing the funny Imperial Fist thing that you talked about earlier, Aiden.
Oh, yeah,
if you were like the Necron version of that guy and you were like, I love to put this dude with like some Immortals or something.
Yeah.
Now you're like, well, okay, I guess I won't be doing that ever. I'm like, you've identified the problem and you've tried to solve it in this weird sideways way that just means people will still take him because he didn't really like. Okay, this is my problem with the Necron one, right? Is like, yeah, sure, they got points nerfs, but it's not that much. It really just means they probably shuffle a few things around or drop a unit. And I think that's kind of the same for Eldar as well when we get to them. But like, it's just really weird to me. I think you made a good point. Like, they went after like internal balancing and Necrons, which is fine if they went after that for everyone, but then leaving some by the sideline, super weird. And the Lion is still more expensive than all the Catan shards. So I think that means they're still probably a little bit undercosted. Maybe you don't see 3 anymore, which is fine. It was a bit of a skew anyway. I think maybe it's kind of like the solution to the Necron point increases as a Necron player is like, okay, maybe I just take a different Catan. And they're still going to be super good, you know? So I reckon they're still going to be like right up there at the top. They're an army to beat. I think World Leaders have better play into them now. But they're still a challenge. Maybe Hypercrypt becomes a lot less viable, but I think Canoptic Chord is still like super, super viable because the Monolith went up a lot of points as well. And I think that hurts Hypercrypt a lot.
So the one thing I want to touch on with Wraiths as well is, so we can, again, the point you made of Technomancer is great. Like, you just look at you have the problem unit, which is the Canoptic Wraiths and the Technomancer. All you have to do is look at it. Was the Technomancer being taken with any other unit? No. So is the problem the Technomancer? No. It's the Wraiths. But the thing as well, and this is the one thing that confused me with the race thing, because we have seen GW do nerfs before to stuff that isn't particularly strong. Now in this case it is strong, but units that cause extreme negative play experiences, things that just straight up aren't fun. I have played against 18 Wraiths multiple times. It is miserable. I hate it. It's boring. Even if you beat it, it's so boring. It's a 4 wound, 4 up invulnerable, 5 up feel no pain. It's OC2 as well, which is mega annoying. It's not just easy to out OC. It can move through walls, which is a beast, and it's just a pain. Like, and that basically you can still take, and you're still going to see it. Like, this does not change the 18 Wraith list. You are still going to see the 18 Wraith list, and it's still going to be just as miserable. The only difference being that there'll be 5 less models on the table. That is it.
Yeah, I think we might see a few Mad Lads playing Annihilation Legion because, like, I think that detachment saw a lot of its units like dropping points, and I'm here for it. I love those Annihilation Legion boys. Like, they're they're the real like world leader players of the Necron faction. You know, I'm like, I hope you guys can enjoy this one. But yeah, I think, not wanting to be like overly negative, but I think they could have gone after Necrons a little bit harder than they did. I just wonder, are they going to be stat checked a little bit by the prevalence of orcs, which I think might push them harder than maybe people are thinking about right now. Like, everyone's kind of like talking about the lack of Necron nerfs, but through the lens of the current meta, without really maybe necessarily considering how the input of the Orc Codex is going to warp things. And I think the Orc Codex could actually push Necrons out of the meta or be a significant stat check for them. Like, you know, GT finals, Orcs versus Crons. I'm back in the Orcs like every day of the week, I think.
That's fair. So, David, any opinions on Necrons?
Yeah, they're still bad. I think you guys are right. They're a big problem, and they're going to remain a problem. They have such a good tool set right now. They're going to continue to be one of the top armies. And I think you're right about orcs, but with the caveat that we have to wait to see that manifest in the meta itself, like actually see people taking it and actually seeing it work and everything. That's what I'm waiting for. So I'm going to basically just operate in a change my mind kind of attitude. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to worry about orcs until I have to worry about orcs.
So we're still all agreement that Necrons are still top dogs. Even if Orcs come on and they're really strong, I still think Necrons are going to be up there. So the next one we saw Eldar take a bit of a nerf, but again they got sort of like consolidation buffs on certain units. Eldar was already like still really good, but nowhere near like it used to be. I still think the book's got tons of good units. It's just a really good book. Again, like stuff on like Fugan we might just see him less often. I think they more got a side grade. I don't think anyone looks at this and was like, Eldar now are finally mid tier. I think they're still top tier just because the books and the stratagems they have is still really good. I think again, theirs is just probably another case of reshuffling, but I personally wasn't super worried about Eldar. Because again, I think we will talk about Orcs, guys, but I struggle to see what Eldar does versus 120 points. I really don't understand. Par get ran down. I don't know.
Well, they do have these funny things called like scatter lasers, and they've got tons of them.
True.
And what he's taking right now, like you can load up on a ton of them, and I think you push Eldar to get deep in into its toolbox, they'll actually break out some pretty crazy stuff. So
I think Eldar actually have one of the best matchups into 120 boys. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of what they did with the MSU Eldar builds. I know people are kind of like a little bit like, I wanted to see Eldar like got it harder. I am of the opinion that they're like pretty close to where they should be right now, where they're very much like a high player skill requirement to do well with them, which is kind of how you want Eldar to be, as like this super elite faction. But I think they got some point decreases on some really interesting units for the upcoming meta, namely Striking Scorpions. I ran into one of the Glasshammer guys at Coventry last year playing these guys, and oh wow, can they screen you out? Like, they've got it all. And if they run into your screen, they will mince it. Like, Karandras in a unit of 10 of them is like super good, and it's pretty cheap now. So I think one of the best ways of stopping 120 boys for the Eldar is just like line up 15 infiltrating striking scorpions and just say like, what up? You can't deep strike in front of me. You can't deep strike behind me. Whatever. And I think MSU Eldar is like quite powerful in that sense for like not necessarily killing the 120 boys, but for locking them out of the game. As for Bully Boys, I don't really know, but we'll get to that whenever. I think was a super cool update for Eldar because it took some problematic units, apart from the Warp Spiders, who managed to remain the same. Really puzzling to me. But like things like Shadow Spectres saw a big increase, and the support platforms are like really expensive now compared. I think they started the edition on 65 or maybe 55, and now they're like 135. So they've gone up. Which is good because they were like probably the most toxic element of the MSU Eldar build, was just being like railed by like 3D cannons from behind a wall. So like, yeah, cool to see them
right next to it or whatever it is that they take. That it's just like, oh, okay, I hit 3 times, I get 1 auto dev wound, and look at that, I rolled another one. Oh, I got a reroll, I got a 3rd one.
Yeah,
it's like, okay,
yeah, no, they're so it's cool to see them sort of like maybe phase out a little bit. I am very interested to play into MSU Eldar now. I actually already think it's like a very interesting game for the World Leaders player. They have a lot of questions to answer, but like you can definitely win that game. You could do it before. I think you can definitely do it still. So while I think in the hands of a very good player, they will be super scary to play on the tabletop, they are by no means as much of like a, global menace as the likes of Necrons are going to be.
Yeah, Necrons compared to Eldar is so much easier to play. Sorry, David, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, Necrons can play the primary game, I think, a lot stronger than that. And when you look at Eldar, that's kind of the problem that I always see trying to build an Eldar list is, what am I actually going to put out there to go sit on objectives? And, head to toe in that codex, there's a lot of stuff that's like, wow, I'm paying this many points for a unit that, like, roughly the same equivalent of is like 50 points in most other indexes. A lot of their aspect warriors are just not, they're just a little expensive, I think, still. And they just don't have anything that they can put out there and just be like, come budge me off here, other than really going deep into stuff like wraiths or the wraith guard and stuff. So
The
and even
Avatar of
then,
Cain, baby. That thing is
But,
hard to
yeah.
move.
Doombolt gets rid of that real quick. So I mean, there's a lot.
Doombolt gets rid of everything real quick. Doombolt is not a good metric for like how tough a unit is. It literally ignores everything. Yeah. I had like my Demon Prince and Foot, like the toughest unit in the game, and Doombolt is just like goodbye.
Well, look, I mean that's our hammer for every problem in the game, and that's where my brain goes. So I have no excuses for that, but I'm not apologizing for it either. So that's how I think about the Avatar, and you can also kill the Avatar with just tons of little shots. And on the Warp Spiders, I think it's okay that they're not getting nerfed. Not really good. But I think a lot of folks kind of play them once or twice and realize, okay, I know how to play against them. And from there, that just kind of settles it.
That's fair. So yeah, Eldar I still think is going to be good. But again, I think Eldar is the faction probably the most out of the ones that are going to be topping the meta that has the highest skill floor. Like you have to be good at that army. If you're bad, you can be bad at 18 Wraith Necrons and still get a free 2. You can be bad at 120 boys and still get a free 2. You're bad at Eldar, you're going 0-5. Like you can get punished really hard with that army. So so next up on I'm going to leave Orcs to the end because probably the biggest discussion is the upcoming menace. We're probably not going to talk about Tau because we just don't know. It's all dependent on the points for Tau. But we'll just quickly say if Tau points are like sort of similar, they're going to be scary. But again, we're not gonna go into speculation on that. We'll wait till we get some solid evidence on the Tau points. But we got Sisters. Sisters were already doing really good. I think they just took some nerfs like Arco Flagellants and some stuff like that. I still think Sisters are probably going to be really good. But again, one of the more higher skill cap requirement armies in the game. But I don't know how you guys feel about Sisters. I'm not too fussed about Sisters as Death Guard because indirect -1 save can really hurt them, and plus they're quite close range faction, so I think Death Guard are quite decent to Sisters, but I'm not sure what you two guys.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. They're still going to be super good. World Leaders have great play into Sisters. I'm not terribly stressed. The army that wants to run at you runs into the army that really wants to run at you. The one that wants to really run at you tends to kind of win out. They also have like pretty low leadership across the board, which is real bad for them when the Exalted 8-man run into them and they fail their leadership check, and they cannot fall back from those guys. Because that can just lose a game in one dice roll. So yeah, I think they're, in the wider meta, still super strong, still have great play, put tons of models on the table. But yeah, ultimately, I'm not too stressed about them.
T-Sons? Sisters?
They're good for you, they're bad for us. They're really they generally do what we don't want, which is running across the table really quick at us. It requires us to have certain tools ready for them in our lists. The indirect can be a problem to deal with the exorcists. Generally speaking, it is a tough matchup into Sisters.
That's a fair point. One thing I'm going to ask, and we'll just talk about guards for the last one as well. Obviously we got like Space Marines, Ironstorm and stuff. 5 more points per multi-melter. I still think you're just going to see it. Like, worst case scenario, those lists drop a squad of scouts. Or the Caladius that they're all bringing.
Yeah, Ironstorm is functionally unchanged, really, to be honest. Like, and same with Grey Knights, they drop the Tech Marine or something cute like that. But yeah, they haven't changed. They didn't really go after those lists. And, whatever.
So what I was going to ask to sort of summarize this, because we're kind of all coming to the same conclusion on things, is most of the top armies maybe have to drop a unit. I don't see any of the top armies have took nerfs like where CSM did, where fundamentally units just aren't viable anymore, like Dark Apostle, Dark Communes and whatnot. Like, all the units that got nerfed are still perfectly takeable, and it looks like you're, rather than looking at taking those units out and swapping them for something else, you're looking at what chaff unit you can drop. So I don't think I don't think my list personally changes from any of the current top dogs that are getting changes. I don't know if that any impact on your guys. I imagine most of the changes are going to come for the upcoming armies rather than the nerfed ones.
Yeah, a little bit. I think obviously the changes to World Leaders has like functionally changed how some of us are like building an actual list archetype. And I think those archetypes actually play better into some of those top armies now. For example, before, where I had like one 10-man squad of Berserkers, now I have 3. So into certain gunline armies, I can just throw 30 Zerkers at you in my go turn, kill the stuff that I want to kill, and say, "Cool, can you deal with this much blood surge?" And if you can't, haha, you're in for a bad time. Like guard, for example, my new list is like much more favorable into guard because they will never kill a unit of berserkers when one of their units activates, which means I'm almost like guaranteed a blood surge. And if they miss position, like it's actually just very hard to play around that mechanic. You have to be 7 inches away from me for me to not get into engagement range with you. Not always possible when you're fighting around objectives. Like it's very, very powerful ability. So I think that's great. And yeah, I feel a lot more confident about most of those top meta factions, especially MSU Eldar. Like they're never killing a unit of berserkers in one go. So yeah, just running into them is good times. I think the top of the meta is more attackable for a good World Leaders player now. Given our changes, I think we are going to see probably a few more event wins for World Leaders than we saw in the previous season, and definitely a lot more podiums. I myself am hoping to get a podium in this current season at a GT or major.
Nice. About Thousand Suns, do you see your guys changing any builds, or do you reckon it's like, again, we'll talk about the Orc impact on our builds, because Orcs are probably the one faction that are going to impact, but if Orcs weren't releasing, is what I'll say, if Orcs didn't exist, would you be changing your list?
No, I think Thousand Suns are generally solidifying around, we have a pretty general consensus list of what we bring, and it generally has Magnus, it has Ahriman, it has your Infernal Master, a bunch of Flamer rubrics, and then it's your flavor of like, do you want 2 Mutalisks? Do you want 3 Mutalisks? Do you want just 1? Are you taking other stuff like that? It's just kind of, you get about 300 to 400 points to work with at the end, and that's your flavor for what your list does. And the funny thing is after we talked last week and we started bringing up the thought about Orcs and everything, with the Thousand Suns, even if Orcs does come out and Green Tide's a thing, I don't think it changes anyways, because everything that we have that we are currently taking is the same stuff we'd take into Green Tide as well, and we just have to make do with it. So, like our Mutalisks have flamers on them. Our flamers are flamers. We have Doom Bolts. We have, we're pushing more into Zangors now, generally speaking. So we're getting lots of bodies to get in the way and stuff like that. So I think that's the same toolkit that you'd use into Orcs.
That's a fair point. That is a fair point. So what we'll do then is I suppose we will talk about the Green Menace. Before I do that, Land Raider Redeemers didn't go up. I'm so angry.
Bro, what the hell? Like, what the hell? How did they get away with that? The one Space Marine tank, more so than Gladiators, I was like, guaranteed Land Raider Redeemer going up in points. I would have bet like hundreds of euro on that going up. And it didn't. What the hell?
But are they that big of a problem?
They are for me. I've been torched by them in Overwatch so many times. It does not feel good.
You can tell which one of us isn't the melee army.
Yeah, right? I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like a massive tank with a 24-inch exclusion zone.
Just Doom Bolt.
Right? I mean, yeah, for me, big problem. Like, big problem. They're just like a no-go zone when I see them on the table. Yeah, I mean, okay, like outside of the World Leader bias, though, like they're not like that bad. It's kind of like funny that they didn't go up, but like, are they that bad? I don't know. Maybe not.
I still hate them.
I do hate them. Yeah.
Storm Raven, we could talk about a little bit differently there, but yeah.
Yes, Storm Raven needs to go up for sure. I'm Legendary Mike. Thank you for becoming a member for 5 months in a row, mate. Massive appreciate the support. We will bring them salvation from the hell. Yes, we shall. We'll try our best anyway. But what we'll do is we'll talk about the Green Menace itself. Orcs. Orcs looking pretty nutty. And I'm gonna go off on this one a little bit here because someone in the chat, Ben, has said something I actually think could be true, which is Ben says the Orc Codex is honestly toxic for competitive play overall, I believe. But hey, maybe in 3 months GW can make the characters more expensive and make Meganob and leave Meganobs at 30 points still. A little jab at the Rave Sleep there. Yeah. So I am concerned by the Orc Codex. I think there's this weird thing that's happening at the moment where everyone's just like, oh, but it's Orcs and Orcs are fun. Yeah, if this book would have come out for any other army, like if T-Suns came out, if Willie's, or like especially like some like Tower, this was the Custode book and the Orc was the bad one, people are being uproar at how ridiculous some of these rules are because
Like that is so true. Like 100% orc players will like gaslight you into like thinking that you're having fun while they just ram 120 boys into your deployment zone in like turn 2 of the game. Is actually like you're so right. If this was any other book, everyone would be in uproar, you know, being like, I can't believe you're doing this. But like the orc players are like, finally, we get to have a powerful army. I'm like, bro, you've had a powerful army every single edition. Like, don't pretend that you have. I remember buggy spam. I remember plane spam. I remember. Do you guys remember the looted Death Star from 8th edition? That thing was toxic, you know. Like it's just stuff like that where I'm like, okay, it might seem fun to you to run 120 boys, and maybe for the first time it is. But like, there's a couple of orc players in our Discord, and they've even said that they're already bored of 120 boys. Like, it's just that is actually probably the mega knobs is one thing, right? The mega knobs are ultra cheap, and they're basically wardens, blah blah blah. We all know that they're silly, but the 120 boys, I think, is actually not even that it's necessarily stronger, but the play pattern and the gaming experience for both the orc player and the opponent playing 120 boys is just miserable, you know, especially as like a melee player. All they do is like, if you don't go first, they jump 20 boys across your deployment zone and lock you out. It's just endless swarm, except they keep doing it, and they're actually way better because they have combat potential and are way more durable. Like, as an example, I'm going to ask you guys this question. You probably didn't see it in our Discord, right? So you got Angron, right? 19 attacks on the sweep. How many boys do you think he kills if there's a pain boy in the unit?
No.
And you've got sustained hits up on Angron as well. 2's re-rolling 1s with sustained hits.
2's more sustained hits. Oh, it's gonna be so. It's gonna be so like thingy. It's gonna be like really misleading. What damage do you sweep?
Or somewhere in there? Probably.
Damage 2 sweeps.
I reckon you kill at 9.
You kill 7.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and I've seen like a lot of world leader players like on the hard cope being like, you just send in Angron and you kill like 16 boys, dude. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't ever do that. Like, what are you talking about?
It's called bait.
Yeah, right? It's just like, that never happens. The most efficient unit we have is Karen with 10 Berserkers and +1 to wound, and they kill 18, which is good. But then they have a strat to revive boys, which is less good. So yeah, I think that play pattern is going to be very, very difficult for a lot of armies to find answers for. I think a lot of people are starting to kind of become aware. I think the conversation online is changing from one of like, oh, that looks super fun, I'm really happy for the orc players, to being like, maybe this is a little bit concerning actually. And I think give it 2 weeks time and the conversation online will be similar to the one that we were having around buggy spam, where everyone is sick of orc players.
It's a shame too, because it seems like you're right. Every edition, orcs just generally tend to have a build that is ridiculous. I remember the shock attack guns that they had. I remember the big mech builds that they had, where it was, you know, in a game of rule of 3, somehow their mech guns let you bring like 9 of them or whatever it was, or even more than that. And hilariously, I remember we had a tournament here where the table was bare enough that the orc player was able to get on top table, and it was completely like top table was mostly barren, and he just basically would set up, go first, blow the other army off the table, and he won the tournament just basically sitting there on top table like every single game. And it was just kind of like, all right, this is kind of ridiculous. I mean, I don't know how much the terrain played into that, but I'll just say that I've seen that happen with orcs where they can be enough of a menace. You'll like this and that with my world eaters in 9th edition. I remember being able to, with drop pods, which was nice, put the drop pods right in the orcs and play the counterplay, and then just use the 4-up deny when they go to jump out, and you could actually block their entire orc army in their base. Now with
that was a hell of a drug. Yeah, we missed that.
That was so fun. That was so much fun. And yeah, now it's just kind of like, and back then you could put a unit of like 5 berserkers into a big 20-30 man boy unit, and you'd probably take out a lot of them. Now probably not as much, and that's, I think it's the defensive stuff that kind of scares me a little bit on that.
It's all the defensives.
I dislike 5 invuln.
I don't care about the 5-up invuln. What I care about is re-rolling 1s on the 5-up invuln. I'm like, whatever about the invuln. It's kind of dumb that they have it, but like big green energy. All right, whatever. But re-rolling once, it like kind of brings them to like I think it's like a 4.5 in Vuln is basically like the odds of it. It's crazy powerful.
Yeah.
Obviously Mega Knobs are going to be an issue, right? Like they're ridiculously undercosted. There's just no denying that. I genuinely don't think there is much of a stat check as 120 boys though,
No.
and I think a lot of people are sort of maybe mistakenly thinking that the chess clock is the enemy of the 120 boys. I don't really think that's true because like all they have to do is practice their movement, know how to use the jump correctly, and they just know how to shove models around the board. They're not going to shoot you. You know, a lot of the time they're not even going to roll their melee attacks. They don't need to. It's just a board control army. It's not a damage army at all. Sure, it can table you. It probably rarely does. Probably just locks you in your deployment zone, and they play the entire game. Basically, functions how Endless Swarm did up until now, which wasn't very popular, mainly because gargoyles are actually really annoying to move on the table, but boys are not. And yeah, I just think that once people start experiencing it and playing it, I think the maybe conversation online is going to shift dramatically.
See, my issue.
And the movement.
Go on. You go first.
I was just going to
That's
say,
fine.
movement trays are a thing. Like I see a lot of people, they'll just bring movement trays, and those speed the game up real quick because you can just pick up the trays, put them over, you're done. You don't have to move
Who
every
cares
model
if you're
individually.
losing the
That
odd
kind of
inch here or there? Do you know what I mean? You just like put them
You don't care. Your plan is so simple. You're getting in their face. You're charging them. You're locking them in their base, and that's that. You know, deal with this 20 now. Deal with this 20, and over and over and over again. And there's not a lot of thinking involved. It's just throw stuff, and it's orky. I'll say that it's fluffy.
I think it's probably the easiest like tournament winnable army that has come out of 10th edition. I think it is easier to win with 120 boys than it was to win with 3 Rate Knights at the start of the edition. Like I think it's actually that easy, which is terrifying, you know, when you think about it.
I'm a little sad that they made the Grot tanks legends because that was probably one of the things I actually really enjoyed seeing orc armies with their like painted Space Marine tanks and everything that were like Grot tanks and stuff. That was really funny.
Like I love the book in like its flavor. It's very cool detachment. It's very cool that, but it's just like it. So 120 boys again. I talk about negative play experiences. It's like the Wraith thing, but worse. Surely don't. I mean, like 60 of these boys are going to survive up Feel No Pain as well, because you're going to take Trouble Pain Boy, and you're going to have to try and chew through them. And the problem is, like Dara said there, I think like this is probably one of the easier ones to play because it's also, does your opponent even know what to do against it? And if your opponent just can't, and I genuinely think there's armies in the game that can't do anything about it. Like, I don't know if you play Chaos Knights, how you possibly ever even remotely deal with this army. I feel like you just lose.
I actually, my Chaos Knight army is a couple big knights, and one of them is the Tyrant. So the Tyrant blocks out a 12-inch deep strike, so that gets forgotten. And then I take a ton of Stalkers in there, which have indirect missiles, and then a ton of Gatling cannon shots, which are, I mean, you basically just want tons and tons of shots. And so you're loading up on that, and you don't really need the Melta as much as you might have before. And
can you take the Tyrant variants with the Conflagration Cannon with no deep strike, or are they different?
No, it's just one for the Chaos Knights.
Huh.
Yeah.
There's your answer to 120 boys.
I've been running that plus a Rampager, and generally speaking, into the rest of the meta, the Rampager becomes the target that they have to deal with. And the Rampage, I mean, you were complaining about the Redeemer. I've had my Rampager just walk up to a Redeemer. It's like, all right, Overwatch me, I don't care, and then just basically picks up and throws the Redeemer off the table. Or the Rampager is enough of a problem that it takes all the pressure off the rest of the army, and then you've got this big annoying menace sitting in the backfield that you can't drop your what are they, intercept or the Inceptors or whatever that can come down 3 inches in Space Marines. That's always a problem. So I think Chaos Knights actually have some builds into them. I'm not saying it's going to be good enough to beat them, but I think some of those tools can actually start to work a little bit. The stuff that's kind of overlooked for a while, like Stalkers. Yeah. Tends to get really good where they've got just tons of shots. And I've always been someone that wants to take the one with melee so that if you charge them, well, great, I am going to swing back and do some kind of damage with them. And you have to think about your other matches other than just going all in on killing orcs.
Yeah, I mean, that's like actually a big thing that we're kind of talking about in the World Leaders group at the minute is like, how hard do you skew into orcs while still being able to take other like armies. I think I have found a balance. I haven't played 120 boys yet. I've just theory hammered it, but I think my list can do both. But I do have the opinion that maybe both of your factions, like T-Sons and Death Guard, have a much better time of it. Like in terms of general armies in the meta, I would rate both of them as being armies that can actually deal with 120 boys. I think Death Guard more so than anyone else, just because like mass anti-infantry 2+ flamers seems like a pretty viable answer to 120
or
infantry
the fact
models.
that we bring a demon prince in now, we can just target the pain boy.
Very true. Yeah, very
cool.
true.
And then there's your defensive stuff. So
my worry is, because I do agree, I think that we can deal with it. My worry is how much commitment it takes to deal with it. Because I'm worried I would get into a situation where I take a take all comers list and then it's just bad for that matchup. And if it's popular, I'm going to have to prepare for orcs. But my biggest worry is the orc Ironstorm. I feel like I prepare for orcs, I lose to Ironstorm. Prepare for Ironstorm, I lose to orcs. Because Ironstorm is just Gladiator Reapers, naturally beats orcs. It also has the anti-tank built-in, so it's like it can fight itself as well. Whereas as Death Guard, I'm like, cool, I can take all the flamers in the world and absolutely murder like 120 boys. But my concern is then, like, if I get that pairing into the Ironstorm and I'm just sat there with flamers, I'm like, cool, I lose. And it's already rock paper scissors, and I worry that having two of the top meta lists, one being full vehicle, one being full boy horde, is going to make that rock paper scissors really hard. I know there's a lot of talk about bully boys. I do think Green Tide is far stronger, because the thing is, when we talk about bully boys, people are like, yeah, but they're going to have 3 units of mega knobs. There are ways to deal with mega knobs that you can't do with boys. Like, I can, like in T-Sons, you could start bringing the sorcerer, or whatever it is, half move, half advance kind of thing. I have malignant playcasters. I can stack -2 move, -2 charge, -2 advance. I can drop a unit of bully boys and Gaz to a 1-inch move, 1-inch charge with a -6. Sorry, 1-inch move, 1-inch advance, -6 to charge. I can do that. I can neuter one of them all game. I can make them hit on 6s in close combat. I have ways to deal with bully boys. 120 boys.
I mean,
it's just
like, here's a crazy idea. Just put the mega knobs in the Green Tide army, because 120 boys is only like half your list.
Yeah, that's
so,
stupid. And then you give them the enhancements, so the counters having 10 models, so they get 2 up saves, re-rolling ones.
Re-rolling ones, baby, yeah.
Rin real quickly did a super chat. He said, I have a 2v2 Tony coming up. We're expecting 160 boys match up. It's honestly making me want to drop, to be honest.
160 boys, yeah, I would literally just be like, all right, see ya. Refund, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I so in the singles stuff, I think. So there's 2 ways you always look at when you've got a big meta shift like this. And this is where I was getting to before, where I'm in a make me change my mind mode. Sometimes you will have an army where you really don't have any good answers, and you sacrifice your ability to play into the rest of the meta, that just because you're thinking that's going to be the big problem, you get so scared of it. It's perfectly reasonable to go into a tournament and your plan for it is to just dodge it. And I've done that plenty of times, where I look at our index, I look at what they have, and I just say, you know what? Custodes was a really good example of it in the beginning of the edition. I just said, you know what? I don't have a good solution to this right now. It is a very tough army to play into, and I'm just going to hope that I don't match up into Custodes. And sometimes that's how it works out. Other times you play 2 of them in your 6 games. And
Truest
like,
expression of player skill. Dodge the matchup.
Yeah.
Well, Tyranids, when they came out last edition, with like the Leviathan bugs and all that, like when Tyranid Codex launched in it was like really turbo broken.
Yeah.
I was on an Art of War podcast thing, cause it went 5-hour event. They were interviewing me, and basically they asked me, the Nid book's coming up. Have you seen it? I was like, I've seen the leaks, and what we seen. He's like, what's your plan for it? And my plan was literally that: pray I don't play it. I was like, I can tailor my list potentially, and then make me have 90% bad matchups before having a okay matchup into the meta thing, or I can just stick with what I'm doing and just pray I don't get it.
I mean, like, Peak Living was like us at Manchester, right? Where we both brought tailored lists to beat Custodes, and then neither of us played them. It happens. I do think...
You want to know the funny thing? Sorry, I was just going to say, you want to know the funny thing is, like, Tyranids, the game has been out for at least a year now, and I have gone to probably at least half a dozen big tournaments, including LVO. I have not faced Tyranids once. Of all of those, like I've never had one, even in my RTTs, even practice games, everything. I've not actually played into Tyranids once this edition yet,
That's
and
wild.
it's just
That's
kind of
mad.
like I don't know how that happens. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think you make a really good point though of like at what point do you like have to reality check yourself and you're like, I'm skewing my list building way too hard into this. And Brian did it for me when the data slate came out and I was like, blah blah blah, anti-orcs. Ah! And I just went off on a mad one. Like my spiral in that group chat was terrifying to watch. But I think what I landed on in the end was something that is like has a good game into 120 boys or bully boys, but still plays the rest of the wider field quite well. And I think that's kind of what you should try to achieve. And I think all three of our factions can do that. It doesn't mean that the game is like favored for you when you play into 120 boys, but it just means that you have a chance or you have tools. And if player skill is in your favor, which, for the three of us being quite good players, it generally will be in our favor. Um, it's a game that is winnable, and I think that is really the most that you can ask for, unless we're literally seeing 90%, tournament representation for a single faction, which will never happen.
or if
So
there's
yeah,
at
I think
least enough that I know that getting to that X and one record at the event, I'm going to run into, a layer of at like the mid to top tables, a layer of a certain list. If I'm in like your situation and I'm thinking, look, I think I have a legit shot at making a podium at this event, then that's when that thinking starts to come into play and you start to say, look, now it gets a little more serious and now I actually have to have an answer for that because I know there's going to be X number of players in the field and some of them are going to be in there and I'm very likely to run into that to get over the hump, so to speak.
So here's a question. I think Green Tide's more better than Bully Boys in general, because as I said before, I think there's way Steel Boys. However, I think Bully Boys will be more popular than Green Tide, just because of how easier it's going to be to get on the table. Meta chasers exist, meta people that want to go for it. If you give the meta chaser the option of buy 18 meganobs or buy 120 boys, I can guarantee you what most of them are probably going to pick. So I wonder if Green Tide is going to be dominant but not overrepresented, and Bully Boys is going to feel potentially overrepresented but not be as dominant. I'm just wondering about it. I do wonder.
I don't think so.
You not reckon? You
I
reckon?
think it will. I think it'll be meta. It'll be very regional because I think in certain regions you've got folks that already have that many boys or they have more of them and they're just sitting on the shelf and they're like, hey, now's my time. I'm going to bring them out.
Yep.
Let's go. They don't have any painting to do. They're just ready to go sitting there.
That is exactly what I think. The analogy that I said, for anyone who has brought up this point, and quite a lot of people have, of being like, but what about hobby lag? If you turn around to me tomorrow and said the meta was as good for 60 berserkers as it was for 120 boys, I would say like 80% of the world leaders player base is like, cool, got the army ready. Like everyone has it, And I think a lot of orc players who are like actual orc players, right? Not meta chasers. They've got the 120 boys. They've been waiting for this, and they are frothing at the mouth to be able to play this. Like it's like their big orky dream, right? All in one picture is like, oh, I can literally just run 120 boys across the board, not have to think, and win every game.
I hope they get bored of it.
Oh yeah, they will. No, that's like a real thing. They will get bored of it. Like people who actually enjoy playing orcs for the sake of playing orcs will probably swiftly realize that while they can win a lot of games, it is no fun to play. And also, like, if you play a 6-round event, can you imagine how tired you're going to be?
Yeah.
And how, like, your back's going to be in shambles moving that many boys around the place, right? So attrition is going to be a real thing. Yeah, right, you do.
Now.
Yeah. Yeah. So all, like, back squats for the next while. Yeah, I think it's going to be a funny one to watch. The funniest thing for me right now is the people who are like coping hard, being like, "Oh yeah, it's not a problem. I can beat 120 boys." Especially world leader players who are coping hard. Like you guys have like no fucking idea what's about to happen.
Yeah,
it's not going to be good.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to say like I can beat this. I think it's another thing to say I have the tools that I have to deal with it. It might not be enough. It might be enough. I don't know. That's another way to look at it, and that's kind of where I'm at. Like I said before, I think Thousand Sons have the tools, but the lists that are being brought right now, that's what we've got. And you've got to deal with the rest of the meta. There's still going to be Custodes out there. There's still going to be Space Marines. And Space Marines are right now, I would say, probably in an awful spot. They're not good, and they're still going to be 25-30% of the field. They always are. They're always very well represented. So you likely are going to have some kind of answer to play into them.
But do you need to think about that answer is my question, because like I can't remember the last time I've lost to a Space Marine player in a tournament setting, That wasn't like a highly competitive like Iron Storm kind of variant, right? Because most of those players who are turning up to like tournaments are like, I'm having a great time with my custom Space Marine list, and I'm like, I'm here for you, bro. But like that's rough, like they're going through. And I'm here for it. Like I like it, Like that was me with my World Leaders in 8th edition, so I respect that a lot, and I'm here for it. And those are the people who are like the grassroots of the tournament scene. It's very important for them to like have a good time. But yeah, I mean, Marines is Marines. But you're right. Like we have to consider the rest of the meta. Crons are still going to be like highly popular. Eldar is still going to be out there. You're going to run into like a shark on MSU Eldar, and they're just going to take you to town. So like yeah, there's a lot to consider. It's quite a varied meta right now. There isn't like one thing where it's like, oh yeah, I have to know how to play into that. Like Orcs is the closest to that, and even then, I would say Dave brings up a great point of like, if you hard focus into beating the Orc matchup, it is to the detriment of other big meta armies that you are going to run into. So I think it's actually quite an interesting puzzle to solve. Like, it's always kind of fun when these situations come up and you have to like look into your index and say, well, what can I bring? Like, what's a good answer to Orcs? Like, for example, really interesting one that I found was looking through my book again, being like, all right, what do we have in here? And I came across an enhancement called Battle Lust, which gives a unit a free heroic intervention every single turn.
Okay.
Pretty cool. On a Master of Executions with 10 Berserkers, when you bodyguard your Exalted 8-pound brick, the Orcs line up a nice charge into them, and he heroically intervenes with Fight First. Nice. It's a pretty good vibe. So that is like one of the things where I'm like, cool, that opens up a ton of space.
Just out of curiosity, what's the toughness on the boys? Is it 5?
T5, yeah. So those Zerks will be winning on 3s when they heroically intervene.
I was just thinking, like, we've kitted all our Forge Fiends with plasmas. Is it time to take them off and put the assault cannons back on? Like,
I had this like fever dream. It's okay. I ran the numbers because all those plasma guns still blast, and you're firing into 20-man squads, so you actually end up generally getting more damage. Yeah. So yeah, the time, and like with the Hades autocannon, the Feel No Pain comes into play a lot more than with the ectoplasma as well. So, yeah, the time of the plasma is still reigning supreme, thankfully. But Forge Fiends are kind of cool Forge Fiends are a unit that will shoot well into a boy squad and still shoot well into a lot of other meta armies. It's like, they're like a great all-rounder unit, So there's stuff out there. There's ways of solving the puzzle. I'm kind of like equal parts apprehensive but excited to play a good player on 120 boys just so I can like work it out. And then maybe refine my opinion and, view on the whole thing. Because right now it's all Theory Hammer for me. And while my view might be one of like, this is very concerning, I haven't experienced it in real life yet. So take everything that I say with like that kind of grain of salt.
That's fair. Rin in chat is saying that he agrees with you that he's seen way more green tide being picked up than Bully Boys. Fair enough, maybe I was wrong on that one. But he also says that feel no pain blobs are toxic as is, but cheap ones, it's covered by a little blue symbol on the screen, with reroll saves is gross. I think feel no pain is massively undervalued by GW. Like, every unit that gives like an entire unit 5-up feel no pain is like way cheaper than it should be.
It's crazy. Yeah, like they're really undervaluing Feel No Pain in this edition when like durability is king. I feel like the edition started being super lethal, so people kind of pivoted into durability builds, and now durability is like the king.
I think on its own, Feel No Pains are actually not that bad. It's when they combo that with stuff like 4-up invulns, and that's when you start to really get into big problems because you're taking off so much. You're guaranteed to take like half of the stuff away before it even gets to a Feel No Pain, and that's where I feel like that's where the big problem is. They're allowing too many of those things to get layered on together.
Yeah, that's a fair point. It's
the GW curse lasagna strikes again.
It's going to be interesting though. I think we're all gonna have to sort of prepare for it. I think I don't know if I haven't checked the Meta Monday results yet. I've not seen if orcs are legal just yet in most events.
It'll be next week.
Next
week
so
is the one to look for.
It'll be interesting to see what obviously happens, if it's going to be casually over time, or if it's going to just like hit the stats instantly, which I could see it doing, to be fair. It's going to be interesting. One thing I will say is I think the first few times I'm probably going to have fun against it, and then even if I can beat it with Death Guard list that's tailored to it, I think I'm going to get tired of it very quickly. And I just remember one of my games I had against an opponent. He was playing like the 18 Wraiths, and I was like, God, I hate this list. And he was like, I hate it too. And I was like, why are you playing? I was like, he's never understood it. I'm just like, he's literally telling me, like, yeah, it's not really fun to play this list. And I'm just like, yeah, you brought it.
This was your choice, bro. Like, you did not have to play it. No one put a gun to your head and said, you're going to go to this tournament and you're going to play 18 rates. Like, which is like the weird thing. I'm like, I would never like to get to that point with World Leaders where I'm like, I don't enjoy playing this, but I'm bringing it to a tournament. I'm like, nah, man, I'm going to a tournament to have a good time, like make some new friends, throw some dice or whatever, you know? I'm not going to bring like the list of suffering, you know?
I get asked a few times, like, Aiden, why are you never taking like the triple Plague Bus Crawler, 30 Plague Marines and 3 Rhinos, like the build? And I'm like, because it's boring. I want to use more than 3 data sheets in my army. And like, you can still do fine without it. Like, to be honest, sometimes even better because people don't expect the weird like techie stuff that you can bring. But yeah, like it's going to be an interesting meta. I think we're going into. Orcs definitely going to be up there. You're still going to see all the usual culprits. I don't think anything has changed up there. Sort of round off, do you think any army has been buffed enough to now, possibly World Eaters again, like you said before, to be considered? Is there any army that received, because obviously, like we said, the top got a little nerf, but like it was all side grades, they're all still at the top, so you still need to plan for all the Necrons, all the stuff like that. Did any army see enough of a glow up? Part of the Orcs, because they're a new book. Custodians, obviously, I am not even bothered about Custodians anymore. I imagine, like, especially the 1,000-son player up there's probably just laughing his ass off. Doombolt truly is the answer. Did any other faction get brought up to a level where we're now concerned about it? I don't think any faction got buffed enough to sort of say they're the new thing with everyone on the block.
I don't think so. I genuinely think this could be like a World Leader season. Like, this is the most competitive we've been since the start of 10th edition, I would say. And this is the least hostile meta that we could be playing into. I really wouldn't be surprised if World Leaders shine through in this season.
On the Tizcan side?
I have to completely agree. I think across the board, there's some armies that I was keeping an eye on that are a little bit more. I mean, they're good and they're under the radar a bit. Black Templars is kind of one of them, and they took some heat. Space Wolves is maybe one that's out there that they got a few things that got a little bit cheaper. We're waiting to see what happens with Tau. Across the board though, otherwise, I think he's right. I think World Eaters. I think Chaos Space Marines are going to be a nasty menace for a lot of people. I think that's going to be a big problem here, at least for the near future until they get their codex. Outside of that, I think it's what happens with Orcs here. And again, remember that a lot of times what they've been doing now is they've been releasing the codex, and then there's a day one points change in the data sheet. So that's why I wouldn't panic to start making some moves yet on things unless you just literally have nothing to paint and hobby on or whatever, and you have stuff that you would need regardless for Green Tide. I would just kind of be patient, wait, see what happens, make them prove that there's something you have to deal with, and then deal with it, rather than try to get ahead of the curve and be ready for it, because you're playing a guessing game. And in the past, I've tried to do that at tournaments, and it always works out really bad. You come prepared for a certain thing, you never face it, or it just flat out doesn't work as well as you thought it would. When I've ever, you were mentioning not having a fun list to play. Whenever I've gotten to a point where like that's my army and that's like its strongest build, I've always just kind of gone off and played something that was a lot harder to play, just because I'd rather win on player skill in the game than just. Hey, I bring these things that have these points. Like Alpha Legion in 9th edition was like my game. That was just bring in some really weird shit that nobody was prepared for. I could jump stuff around the board. I could take objectives away, which was really, really strong. And it was just a lot of fun to play in general. And just seeing how good I could do with that, in general, kind of helped me a lot with getting better and learning how to play certain things a little bit differently. So
I think that's a great point. Yeah.
Totally. Right. So we'll very quickly summarize up then, and then we'll probably call it theirs for tonight. So I'm just going to start off. I think overall, Death Guard out of this slate, still in a good spot. I think we're going to be sort of mid-table still. I don't think we're going to be. I think people, start to respect Death Guard. I still think we can do a lot of work in the meta. We have a good answer for some of the top armies like Green Tide. Biggest problem for Death Guard probably is the fact like Grey Knights, which is one of our hardest matchups, and T-Suns, one of our hardest, didn't get. None of them really got nerfed to the point where it's like, okay, that's now at the meta. So we still got to be aware of that. But we still have play into it. I don't think there's a single army out there that I could feel like Death Guard just auto loses to. I think they're difficult matchups, but there's easier ones. And if the Orc Menace, so in the crazy world that the Orc Menace happens and it's 80% player rate of Orcs, I think Death Guard has got game, and we definitely can whip out some tools. Like, I might even bring a Noxious Blightbringer for an aura of like -3 leadership and just keep battle shocking them so they can't res or anything like that. So who knows? We'll see. But yeah, overall Death Guard, again, not much changed for us. Meta overall around us changed sort of decently, but I think I'm still happy to play in Death Guard. Don't think we need any buffs anyway. Part of the Plague Surgeon. But yeah, overall Death Guard happy. What about you, Dara?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think World Leaders in general in a great spot. The viability of not running Angron in World Leaders has never been higher. The gap is very close between those two builds now, which is awesome. I can't really complain all that much. Like, all my favorite stuff got buffed. Yeah, it's happy days. I'm really excited to hit some tournaments. I got Bristol coming up in like a month and a half, so that should be real fun. And yeah, I got a couple of RTTs as well, and maybe another major in Newcastle before the end of this balance pass. I want to hit this one hard. Like, I'm not gonna lie, this is like the most hype I've been to build lists and play the game since 10th edition dropped, and I've taken my new list out for a couple of games so far. Oh boy, it feels real good on the table. Like, I'm so hype. I can't even begin to explain. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
You just remind me I have an RTT next weekend as well, so that's going to be fun. A 58-player RTT.
Oh, for fuck's sake. What the hell is that?
Welcome to Manchester. Go on then, take us out then, David. How is Thousand Suns feeling?
Calm and Doombolt. And that's all I got to do. Our list, nothing's changed. Didn't hit us that bad. They just took the edge off a couple lists. We got to make a couple of tweaks, but no big deal. We'll be fine. We should still do pretty well in the meta. I'm not sure we're going to see top players jump onto them and go to try to win tournaments with them. Maybe. I don't know. But I don't feel like there's anything I've seen with T-Suns that suggests that, hey, Manny's going to go pick it up, or, some of the folks here in the States are just going to go pick up the army and go run with it. I think it's just kind of, they'll be there. They'll be a challenger. We might see them, podium or do pretty well at some of the big tournaments or challenge to win it. But, I think we're doing pretty good. I don't think anybody's really complaining about the update, and it's just kind of, all right, this is better than getting a massive nerf to the face last week. So
last question, just very quick. We'll do this at the end of everyone as well. I just want to ask you all: can your army win an RTT? Can it win a GT? Can it push a super major or a major? That's all I want to ask you. So I think for Death Guard, 100% you can win RTTs. 100% I think you can take GTs. And I think you're a bit more matchup dependent than some of us, but I think with a good run you actually have a decent chance of potentially taking a major if played well, though it definitely isn't for free. World Eater, can you win an RTT?
Oh yeah, I would say it's like very similar to Death Guard right now. I think you can win an RTT, win a GT like with a decent amount of, just fine play. I think you can take down a major if you get a relatively decent run. You don't have to be super lucky. Obviously, you need to be quite skilled to take this army to the top. It's definitely possible. I'm expecting it. I'm expecting to have to do quite a few interviews on the Red Path with a lot of major winners this season. So if you are a World Leader player and you're out there and you're watching, like, get on that shit, like, start winning some stuff. I want to talk to new people. It's always good fun. And yeah, I mean, it's one of my goals this season is to hit the podium at one of those events.
I'd say that Thousand Suns can win an RTT, but with that, I think any army can technically win an RTT.
Yeah.
They can be very weird and swingy that way, but I would definitely say Thousand Suns can pull that off pretty easily. We can win majors. I think I don't think I can go win a major, but I think the army can in the hands of someone really, really good. And I think it's got the tools to be able to go and actually pull it off almost into any army that right now would be at the top. I think there'd be some clever things that we have to face world leaders with. So we'll see how that goes. I'll put the same out there for folks that if you do win a major, I will be more than happy to interview, and you'd love to hear how it went and how you pull it off. But yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, we'll leave it there then, guys, because we've almost been on for like 1 hour and 45 at this point. So give yourselves one final shout out. Go on, Dara. Where can we find you more if you want to find out more of the ways of Khorne?
Yeah, check us out on the Red Path, Spotify, but mainly YouTube. Check out all our support links. Hop into our Discord, join us on Patreon, all the good stuff. You know where we are. We're hanging out, having a good time. So that's it from us.
And if you're more inclined in the way of trickery, deception, and sorcery, where can we find more of the Tizcan?
TizcanPodcast.com, which takes you to SoundCloud, but we're also on all your favorite podcasts, wherever you like to listen to them. We're on Discord, on the Thousand Suns Discord. If you don't know how to find that, just go to the Thousand Suns subreddit, which is out there, and then there's a link on there.
And of course, if you're a follower of the Death Guild Lord and Servant of Nurgle, you can obviously find more on the very channel that you're listening to right now, which is the Disgustingly Resilient podcast. We have videos all the time, live streams, we're also on Spotify, etc. But for now, thank you very much, gentlemen, from the other gods, for convening to this Chaos Pantheon. We shall reconvene again, possibly after maybe we've all hopefully had an event or two to talk about, see how things are faring up. Maybe we'll all just look absolutely dead and we'll just be like, it's 120 boys. And then Dara will just be like, yeah. Yeah. But hopefully not. Hopefully we'll all still be smiling and happy. But thank you very much, everyone that got involved in the chat and came along to listen. Massively appreciate the support, and we will all catch you on the next one. So from me, stay rotten. From Dara, it's like blood, kill, stay healthy, something like that, I think.
Stay healthy, stay safe, and kill, maim, burn is how we say it, Aiden.
There you go. See, I got you to say it this time. And Tizcan.
Agnes did nothing wrong.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. We'll catch you all on the next one. See you later, guys.